Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander Score Studio. Welcome to the show. So, buckle in for this one. This is quite the doozy of information, and yeah, it's not good. Depending on your perspective, I guess. I've agreed that people can have different perspectives on this. We'll get into what my thoughts are on it. I think you can already tell kind of how I feel about it. So let's jump into it. Magic the Gathering plans to release 2 Tale of Middle-earth size crossover sets per year starting in 2025. The success of last year's Lord of the Rings set has paved the way for more premier size Universe Beyond crossovers. So this is something that I've talked about in an episode or two in the past where I was definitely worried about this because, well, they really pushed Lord of the Rings. It was a successful set, and yeah, with that success, we kind of saw the writing on the wall potentially, and that success happened for a couple different reasons. I mean, they pushed certain cards in it, like, you know, the one-of-one ring and all that hype, and basically just gambling around that essentially and trying to get that and opening it and selling it for $2.7 million or whatever it was, but also a lot of really pushed cards that we'll talk about here in a little bit. And so, because of the success of that has paved the way again for them to open things up, open up a Pandora's box, essentially, which already kind of basically started with Secret Layers, like, you know, the Walking Dead, essentially, and just the crossover becoming a part of Magic, then the crossover in 2023 becoming a part of a main set stay, and now, again, apparently, next year, according to this article on Dicebreaker, the 2025 will have 2 crossover premier size sets. And again, we'll get into the numbers, we'll get into what all this means, and why, in my opinion, it is a very, very, very bad thing for Magic. And at least that's just how I see it. So first up, let's just read this real quick, and I'll give you my thoughts on it. Magic the Gathering players should prepare for even more full-size crossover releases, a la last year's Tales of Middle-earth. Hasbro CEO Chris Cox told investors on February 13th that 2 of the trading card game's 6 annual premiere sets will be dedicated Universes Beyond crossover starting in 2025. So 2 of 6, apparently. That's quite a bit. And we'll talk about the numbers again here in just a little bit and what all that means for the number of cards. While 2024 will seemingly be a year of restructuring and reappraisal for the massive toy company, it laid off 1,100 employees just before Christmas, including hits to the MTG and Dungeons & Dragons teams. Cox was confident that 2025 will replicate last year's bumper revenue crop by doubling down on crossovers. Great. This made up pushing out or replacing a tentpole set, a business-only term the company uses for its 6 annual major releases, to make room for whatever comes after Final Fantasy and several Marvel-themed releases. Yeah, we already got notifications that essentially there will be those Universes Beyond products, essentially Final Fantasy and Marvel. Gross. We already have a rough calendar of MTG's premiere sets through 2026, which include the aforementioned properties plus the Innistrad Remastered supplemental set. Universes Beyond is MTG's imprint focused on trucking outside intellectual properties and other media franchises into the popular trading game, which started with fun reprints sold via Secret Lair, has ballooned to pre-constructed commander decks, including Warhammer and Fallout. Fun is perspective, I guess. And completed premiere sets that rival their 5 other core releases each year. The TCG has hosted Jurassic Park, Street Fighter, Doctor Who, My Little Pony, Godzilla, and The Walking Dead. And while Internal Design has attempted to keep the more outlandish deals away from the main game, we're seeing that resolve slip in recent years. Yeah, most definitely. I will mention that My Little Pony is mentioned. I think technically it's not in universe, but that is a property of Hasbro. Versus a lot of these crossovers coming up are going to be, I believe, outside of actual Hasbro itself, so other IPs coming in. They've also become a massive revenue stream for publisher Wizards of the Coast. Cox confirmed that Tales of Middle-earth earned $200 million in under 6 months, has become the best-selling MTG set in TCG's long history. It's a high watermark amongst an already successful year where 5 of the 6 premiere sets earned over $100 million, a point of pride for Hasbro's C-suite. We'll talk about why they might be making these decisions, even though things have been going relatively well for them with Magic, and pushing further into that because Hasbro's not doing so hot right now. We believe the brands that we'll be shipping in 2025 have the same carrying power as Lord of the Rings, Cox told investors on a recent earnings call. We think we'll have a similar uplift as we did for Lord of the Rings, and that's underlying a lot of bullishness on the growth of Magic. Players expressed worry upon Universe Beyond release in late 2020 that the economic power and mashups, see Fortnite over the last several years, would eventually eclipse MTG's own desire to tell original stories using a competitive trading card game. Several designers, including WotC mainstay Mark Rosewater, initially assuaged the public that financial pressures would not impinge upon creative endeavors. Rosewater's mood has recently shifted to something more akin to pragmatic embracing, and Cox's forecast might be why the future Magic the Gathering is less Planeswalkers and more pop culture. Yeah, I think that's very, very apparent that is unfortunately going to be a pretty dark future for Magic when it comes to that, at least for players like me who would prefer most of this just to stay Magic IP and not just be a billboard, not just be advertisements for other brands, essentially. So, yes, there are positives to bringing other things in. It brings other players in potentially, but also you are most definitely Wizards demolishing your very dedicated player base who's been playing for a long time and does not necessarily want 2 out of 6 of the year's main sets, or I mean, might be that. I mean, I saw somewhere it's 2 of 7. Depends on what you actually call a main set. Regardless, a large percentage of Magic to be not Magic. Yeah, let's really quickly go through again. We talked about how Mark Rosewater assuaged the public that this one happened, and then mood shifted. Let's just read those real quick on Blog Talk. Abazarvazi, let's go with that, asked, one thing I want to say when they first came out, I hated double-face cards. Now the Ixalan and Zendikar DFC lands are among my favorite cards in the game. Took time to warm up to them and find versions I liked. I feel the same phenomenon will happen in Universes Beyond. Once the usual dislike of change wears off and fears of SpongeBob and Lego Batman are assuaged, some players may find UB cards actually like. I do believe 5 years in Universe Beyond will be far less off-putting for the majority of players than some people predict. I disagree, Mark. So actually, and some players, some people out there who are watching are kind of confused where the actual question ends and where this starts. On Blog Talk, this is Mark's response right here. This is the actual question. Yeah, I disagree. I think that the majority of players, of Magic players, are not too happy with the way that this has worked, with the way this has transitioned. Again, end of 2020 is when Secret Lair Walking Dead, I believe, first came out sometime around then, essentially. And ever since then, again, it just has kind of skyrocketed on how many Universes Beyond products there are. And really with, again, Lord of the Rings being the big one last year, where it was a full dedicated set. Previously, just Secret Lair drops. Previously, Commander Precons like Warhammer. And then, yes, Tales of Middle-earth, essentially. Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty off-putting. And again, I think that if you'd ask a lot of the design team, if they were giving an honest answer, I don't know. I don't think that they would actually be like, yeah, Universe Beyond the best thing ever. We'll see. All right. And then this is the other response on Blog Talk. Again, this is Mark's actual response. The question from Hawk7915. I've come around on Universe Beyond. I'm excited for Marvel, but it has me wondering, do you think we'll ever hit a point where UB is so popular it makes it hard to justify printing non-UB product? So a future where because the Marvel set sells Return to Lorwyn, we just never see Lorwyn again? Makes it hard to justify doing anything that isn't a crossover. The recent switch with boosters has me worried about market forces. Thanks, Mark. Mark responded, there are a lot of important business reasons to keep making in-universe Magic sets. Yeah, I mean, that seems what is going on here is that there's a lot of business reasons that things are happening because Hasbro is struggling. If you looked at their financial reports and what they released recently, with that call with Chris Cox, things are not going so well. Their stock has not been doing well at all because their things are not going well in their entertainment side of the business and their toy side of the business. And the only thing that's really buoying them and keeping them up and afloat are things like Magic and D&D. But again, when you lean so heavily on something, and I think this is an article from a year or two ago, or someone from Make America said something like that. Someone in the finance industry basically said that Wizards or Hasbro is killing the golden goose because they are milking Magic for all it's worth, and they're not looking at the long-term goals of Magic. They're looking at short-term gains because they are struggling super hard. So Hasbro, I hate you. Anyways, moving on. Let's talk about really quick last year, just looking at numbers, okay? Last year, 2023, no reprints. Let's see how many cards are printed. 1,923 cards in total. Total new cards. That's a lot. I mean, over the years, we had seen maybe around like 1,000 or so going up and down a little bit. And then all of a sudden back in like 2019 or so, things started really to skyrocket quite upwards. And last year was a lot. Getting 2,000 new cards in a year is a ton and an impossible amount for anyone to really keep track of, essentially. That being said, if you're looking up here, just like at the top of this, and yes, sets release at different times, right? So some cards from the older sets are going to be less popular than cards from the newer sets, but that's not even the case in this image right here. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the top 8 cards on EDH rank from last year are all from Lord of the Rings. So again, when it came to what they were doing with that set, not only were they utilizing an IP that had some crossover potential, because again, like when it comes to actual magic and lore from magic, like, yeah, there's like similar magic that happens in Lord of the Rings. It's not like going from this to Halo, which is completely different, obviously. But that being said, yeah, they actually pushed a lot of cards in that set. One Ring, incredibly pushed card. Delighted Halfling, very pushed as well. Mirkwood Bats, it's a common and it's pushed. Orcish Bowmasters, people arguing that it should have been banned essentially. Mithril Coat, just a better Darksteel plate in many circumstances. Yeah, they pushed a lot of things in that set because they wanted that set to perform well so that they could say, hey, investors out there, hey, people who have other IPs that are exciting, work with us. Look what we did with Lord of the Rings. Work with us right now so we can make the next crossover set be great. So yeah, in 2025, cool, we have more and more crossover sets because they set the foundation of this is a successful thing, and look, players buy it, players want it, cool. Not necessarily the same thing, players buying and players wanting this to actually be a part of Magic when it comes to this amount. Let's talk about numbers. So again, 1,923 cards last year was the total that are not reprints. When it came to Lord of the Rings and the Commander Precons with Lord of the Rings and all those other products with Lord of the Rings, 385 of the cards from last year, about 20% of the cards from last year are Lord of the Rings, essentially. So again, out of Universe, Universes Beyond, essentially, cards that are not a part of Magic IP, not a part of Magic story. Just here you go. We have a crossover. This is a promotion for Lord of the Rings. Congratulations. We sold a lot of this, and a lot of the portion of cards from last year were this. Maybe even more disturbing, though, is actually when it comes to last year, the number of commanders that we had in total, 398 commanders in total. So that already is a number that I like to see go down quite significantly. I think things were, in my opinion, better when you didn't have over one commander a day, essentially. Over one, I don't have background in there. I meant to go no background. There weren't any backgrounds last year anyways. It didn't take it. So essentially, last year, again, 398 commanders. That's more than one a day. That is an absurd amount. I wish they would do less so you could focus on making, better commanders and not just kind of dilute the pool, essentially. Like, oh, this same commander, but just like slightly worse or slightly better or different. Basically, with this, again, when it came to the number of commanders, when it came to Universes Beyond, last year, out of those, what did I say, 398, nearly 400, 179, nearly, what is that, 40, 50%, essentially, 40% probably, 179 of those are from Universes Beyond. So that's, a variety of different products, essentially. You've got, Lara Croft, you've got Lord of the Rings, you've got Doctor Who, you have all these crossover things that are happening, and again, you're just kind of diluting what Magic is into a selling platform to say, oh, look at this crossover. Go check out this other IP, essentially. So it's becoming, again, like a billboard. It is becoming an advertisement. It is becoming, basically, hey, Lord of the Rings is successful, so come other IPs and invest in Magic and let us use your IP so that we can sell to more people. Maybe that don't necessarily care about Magic, but just care about, whatever that IP is, essentially. So yes, there are positives to it. There are also very big negatives to it as well. And yeah, again, seeing that they're saying, again, that starting in 2025, we are getting 2 of these each year is absolutely absurd. So, mathematically, if we're just going to say, again, last year we had 2,000 cards, 20% of those essentially were Lord of the Rings cards. Next year, I guess we can assume that 40% of the cards from next year are going to be from those 2 main sets that are Universes Beyond. So like almost half of Magic is going to be Universes Beyond starting next year. That is just my estimation, based on these numbers. It could be slightly less, slightly more, but that still is just an absurd potential. That is actually a thing that over the half of the cards next year might not be Magic IP, essentially, which is insane. If you told someone that back in early 2020 before any of these secret lair things happened with crossovers, they think you're crazy. That in 5 years, Magic's going to be completely different and not look at all like it is, like you think it's going to be. And then also, I mean, with this argument, yes, they still have good designs on these things, obviously, but they sometimes just push them super hard like they did in Lord of the Rings because they really want you to buy that product so they can prove that it did well. So again, expect in those crossover sets, again, that also they want things to go well. They want to push cards to make sure that those things sell. They want to have an OP card like the One Ring, or a potentially bannable card like Orcish Bowmasters, or just strictly better cards like Mithril Coat over Darksteel Plate, or Delighted Halfling over like a Birds of Paradise. I mean, in certain situations, but in Commander, basically better. Yeah, it's pretty absurd that this is kind of like what Magic has become. And yes, players out there and, you know, people from Wizards actually say, you know, like, well, here's the great thing about Magic is that you don't have to pay attention to all the products. If you don't like something that's not for you, that's okay. Here's the problem. When you play a format like Commander, yeah, you kind of have to pay attention because, and this might just be my experience, but I've also seen other posts post about it on Reddit and talked with some friends as well, but these days it is absolutely impossible to stay afloat when it comes to knowing what each card is and does, and Commander games get longer because I don't know what certain cards do on the field. You just, someone plays that like, okay, that was from what other miscellaneous product that came out last year out of the 2,000 cards that came out last year, because we're getting, again, 2,000 cards per year, essentially. How am I supposed to know what all these do instead of just trying to read through all these, figure it out every single time, and just, again, you have an absurdly large card pool now that is only going to keep growing and growing and growing. And you kind of have to pay attention to, again, when sets come out that you might not, again, I don't want a Marvel set. I don't want that kind of a crossover. I think that's pretty ridiculous. I think that, you know, Magic has jumped the shark in many ways. Magic started jumping the shark starting with The Walking Dead, essentially. And since then, it's just gotten more and more of a weird, distorted reflection of itself again. Lord of the Rings was nice in some ways, very bad in other ways, again, when it came to setting a precedent for what is potentially there in the future. Because, again, executives don't care what the actual content is. They don't care whether something is a crossover or not. They care about the numbers behind it. They care about the money that it made them. And seeing that that made them the most money out of all time, out of any set, is a very bad thing, because they're going to be like, oh, okay, let's do that again and again. Hey, investors, hey, people out there, things are going to go well because, you know what, we did this last year. Next year, we're doing it twice. So expect really big numbers when we introduce really exciting crossovers like Marvel. Look how many people love Marvel. No one's ever tired of Marvel. Cool, we'll do that. And then we're going to do Lego Batman. No, whatever it is. But essentially, yeah, it's just become a weird reflection of itself that is somewhat unrecognizable in some ways. And again, you have this push and pull, I'm sure, between those in Hasbro, those inside of WotC designing things. And again, what Mark said, right? Like Mark said, there are a lot of important business reasons to keep making in-universe Magic sets. Well, again, like, here's the problem, is that, like, business reasons don't always, again, reflect what is best for the customer, because when you're making these kinds of decisions, Hasbro, you are making them, which seems like very, very short-term looking decisions. You are trying to appease to potentially new players, but also just people who care about those IPs but don't really care about playing Magic at all and just might want to collect those things too. But also you are diluting what Magic is, and you are hurting your enfranchised player base who do not want these things necessarily, especially at the clip that you are bringing them out. So no, they're not possible to ignore, because your biggest format does not ignore those cards. Are those, you know, possible to ignore in Standard when they're not part of the Standard rotation? Absolutely, players can ignore those things. But when it comes to an Eternal format like Commander, it is impossible for players to ignore that, and that is a very weak and terrible argument that I have seen a lot of places. Again, in Commander, you cannot ignore those things. Whether or not you put them in your decks doesn't mean that other players won't put them in their decks, and you have to know what they are. You have to be aware of them. It's become a lot. Yeah, it has become a lot. I had one more tab on here. What was I talking about? Let's see. 125. Oh, let's just see. I was just going to point out, essentially, specifically from Lord of the Rings, 125 commanders. Absolutely absurd. So, what? Over a fourth of the commanders last year are from Lord of the Rings specifically, which is pretty crazy. So, again, if we say that that's going to kind of continue for next year's trend, essentially, less commanders in the other sets. And I'm fine with less commanders. I would like less commanders in all the sets overall, because I think that there are too many out there, and things become diluted. Again, when you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Aragorns, there are 7 I think 7 Gandalfs. Let's see real quick. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Gandalf, where are you? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. Sorry, there are only 6 Gandalfs. Things get a bit diluted, and people really stop caring about certain things when you just do it over and over again. So many things. Just, again, can you even name what all the Gandalfs do? I can't. But yeah, 125. If they do this twice, right? If they have 2 sets coming out next year. And again, they seem to focus very heavily on the commanders for those sets because, well, it's about the story and it's about the characters and it's about selling to commander players because that is the main driving force of revenue for Wizards right now. That they are going to be doing this again with that. So we're going to be seeing what, like 250 commanders potentially from those 2 sets alone. Probably at least half of the commanders from that year are going to be outside of universe. It's just, yeah, maybe I'm old man screaming at cloud, but like, again, Magic just isn't what it ever has been, and it is very apparent now, just again, how a game could be what it is for so many years in a row, and then again, decision after decision after decision, and strange justifications for them, because the rest of your business is failing, Hasbro, and you can't accept that you, again, are doing short-term benefits and long-term damage to this game, and it is just pathetic. So, yep, that's my take on all this. Again, definitely I will link the article. Again, Magic: The Gathering plans release 2 Tale of Miller-sized crossover sets per year, starting in 2025. I'll be linking that. Make sure you check it out. Comment below with your thoughts on this. I'd love to hear from you. I love hearing the discussions. And yeah, let me know what your thoughts are. And of course, as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.